So as I said, we're developing quite a Lync complementary portfolio of products. So we've got the contact center, which I'm going to run through today with you all. We've also got our Lync certified phones with the presence indicator on them. We've got Lync SIP deck sets, and we've got a Lync attendant console. So if anybody is looking for an operator console that works with Lync, we've got that as a solution as well. And in fact, that attendant console can work across multiple platforms. So if you've got multiple PBX platforms like Cisco and Lync and Mitel, for instance, that one single attendant console will operate across all of those platforms. So moving on to the contact center, which is why you're all here. This is an example of some of the customers that are actually using this product. So these are all using the contact center for Lync product. A couple of good examples here. We've got Theatre Royal, excuse me, down in Plymouth. We've got Save the Children, the WISE Group, and we've got the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. We've got Christchurch and East Dorset Partnership using the solution, Waverley Borough Council, South Lakeland, Eden District Council, Freebridge Community Housing. So quite a few from across a broad range of industries there. In terms of the product itself, unlike many Lync compatible contact centers available on the market, our product is actually designed to work in Lync. So rather than pulling the call straight out of Lync into our own PBX, we actually take call center features and add those to the Lync environment. So all of the call handling is actually done within Lync using the Lync client. We just add contact center functionality to that Lync client. Please feel free to type in any questions as we're going through, and Chris will put those to me. So we're not using Microsoft response groups. We actually create our own queues with our server, and we actually route those calls into the queues, and I'll show you how when we come on to one of the slides coming up. So this is typically how this would look. So an incoming call would come into a path or a queue. Each path can be given a priority level. So you could have VIP path, for instance, that's got a higher priority level than your standard sales line. When the call's delivered, it delivers into the primary agent group. If you took an example of being maybe a support desk here, these would be your first line engineers. And then in your overflow group, you might have second line engineers that you want to keep free for escalations as much as possible. But if all the primary agents are busy, rather than keep the customer waiting, you would want those calls to overflow to those second line support engineers. So the call comes in, it delivers to the primary agent group. It waits at the primary agent group until a timer expires, and that timer can be anything from 1 second up to whatever you want. When the timer expires, the call actually overflows to the second group, but it continues to look back at that primary agent group. So if it's waiting on the secondary group for an agent to become free, and an agent becomes free in the primary agent group, it will route to that agent. In effect, what we're doing is we're taking the agents in the overflow group and we're adding those to the primary group when that timer expires. So then again, a further overflow timer can be set so that it will then overflow to a third group and continue to look back, and finally overflow into a fourth group. We can also have something that's known as a interflow timer, and what this is a backstop that says in the event of a call not being answered within the ACD environment within a certain period of time, then I'm going to interflow that call to maybe a voicemail system or a Lync response group, a back office type hunt group, or it can even be to another ACD path or queue. So that's our backstop where we say, okay, call's not been answered within 10 minutes, so I'm going to interflow it out to an external answer point. So looking at the topology here, a typical Lync environment, we add one server to this. This server can be Hyper-V, VMware, or an industry standard server, physical server. And what this server does is we see the call coming into the Lync environment down the SIP trunk, and each agent registers and logs in and signs in, tells this server that they're available on their Lync endpoint and ready to take calls in this particular queue. So what this server does is it calculates which agent is the longest idle agent, and then it establishes a conference within Lync between the SIP trunk and that Lync endpoint. So that can be a desk phone, or it can simply be a headset plugged into a PC in the Lync client. It also does things like captures historical information and ready for the historical reports, and it shows real-time monitors here as well. This particular diagram is showing this in a multi-pool, multi-front-end environment. So we've got our MiContact Center for Lync server here, and then we've got some routers connected to each of the different pools that's actually collecting that call record information from Lync and passing it back to the Contact Center for Lync server. So I'm going to flick across to the demo now. So what I've got here is a remote desktop connection. Chris, can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, you're all good.
Thanks. So I've just set up a remote desktop connection to a server in our Caldecott office. And what you can see here is the normal standard Lync client, but you'll notice that we've got a toolbar bolted onto the side. So ignore this toolbar over here just for a minute to the right hand side here. But this toolbar here is connected to Lync. So wherever I move my Lync client, this toolbar goes with it. And this is because I'm set up as a contact center agent. So when I'm ready to actually start my taking calls from the queue, I click on the star icon here and I click on login, and you'll see a number of things happen. So the icon turns green. I'm now wearing a green jumper instead of a grey jumper, and you can see that we inject some statuses into Lync over here. So actually some ACD specific statuses that come in. These are just for call center agents. So everybody in the business can now see that I'm available for ACD, and then this word available is the standard Lync status indicated by the green bar here. So what I've just done is I've just made myself present in the Lync sales queue. So in our sales queue here. So when I'm the longest idle agent queue, I will get the next call. Similarly, you'll notice that there's a support queue here, and I can choose to be part of that queue if I want to. So I simply click on support and apply, and then you can see that I'm part of that support queue and the sales queue now. So I will receive calls from both of those queues. I'm just going to take myself back out of the support queue for a minute. So I will now receive calls on a longest idle agent basis. When I'm ready to put myself into a make busy state, so when I want to stop taking calls from those queues, I click on this stopwatch icon here, and this brings up a list of reason codes. You can have up to 99 of these, and they can be fully customizable. So you decide what you want to put in here. So I'm going to choose dealing with the post, and you'll see a number of things happen. The stopwatch icon lights up, indicating I'm in a make busy state. The icon at the top here changes. I've now got a stopwatch on my shoulder. The timer resets, and you can see that we've invoked the busy status of Lync. So Lync's gone into a busy status, and we can see that make busy dealing with post. So if anybody looks at me in the Lync client, they can see that I'm in make busy, and the reason is I'm dealing with the post at the moment. So what I've done there is I've temporarily taken myself out of the Lync sales queue. So I won't receive any calls from that queue. I will receive DDI calls if I've got a direct dial number. I will receive instant messages, and I can receive internal calls. I just won't get calls from that queue. When I finish dealing with the post, I simply click on remove, and you'll see that I'm immediately available again for taking calls from those queues. The next button down is the do not disturb button. So if I click on this, this looks like a no entry sign. This brings up a separate set of up to 99 fully customizable codes. So I'm going to choose meeting, and you'll see a number of things happen. The icon lights up, indicating I'm in a do not disturb state. This icon at the top here changes, no entry sign on my shoulder. The timer resets. We've actually activated the do not disturb function of Lync, and you can see that we've injected do not disturb meeting into the status here. So unlike Make Busy that just stopped calls coming from the queue, this actually prevents all calls and instant messages, so it really does put you in a do not disturb state. All of these are fully reportable on, so from the supervisor view, you can see all of this, and from the real time and the historical reporting, you can report on this. So when I finish my meeting, I simply click on Remove, and you can see that Lync is immediately available, and I'll start receiving calls again. The next button down is the Cancel Wrap-Up Timer button. So say for instance I had a 3-minute wrap-up time at the end of each call. When I enter that wrap-up time, it gives me 3 minutes for me to update my CRM system, or raise a ticket on my service management system maybe. What this button does is allow me to cancel that wrap-up time early. So if I finished updating the ticket within 1 minute, I can click on this button and make myself immediately available to take the next call. Wrap-up times are assigned on a per queue basis. So if you had a support queue and a sales queue, your sales queue may need 2 minutes for updating the CRM. The support queue might need 5 minutes for updating the service management system. So it's settable. You can set it on a per queue basis. You can also add a wrap-up code of extended wrap-up. So you can see in here I've put one in called extended wrap-up. So if I needed longer than the 5 minutes, I can just simply select that as a Make Busy reason. And again, those wrap-up codes are reportable on. Alternatively, you could set a wrap-up of like an hour or 2 hours, and the agents cancelling that once they'd finished their wrap-up work that they needed doing. The next button down here that looks like a life buoy that you'd see around the side of a lake, this is the Request Help button. So if I was in a call talking to a customer and I was struggling to answer their questions and I needed some assistance, I can click on this button and it will bring up a list of my supervisors. I choose the supervisor that I want to escalate the call to from the list, and that will generate an inbound call to the supervisor, and on their Lync toast pop-up it would say Request Help from Agent Lee Thomas. I'm still talking to the customer has got no idea that I've done this, but what this does is it then, once the supervisor answers that call, they're immediately silently monitoring the conversation between me and the customer. They've then got two options. They can speak to me without the caller hearing, so they can press their Whisper Coach button, and what that does is it just opens the speech path, but not to the caller. So they could say to me, tell the caller you're going to look into this and get back to them, or tell the caller you're going to introduce your supervisor to the call. And at that point, the supervisor can barge in and take over the call from you. So quite a nice bit of functionality there. The next button down here is the dashboard button. So when I click on this, this brings out some information. Remember, this is purely the agent experience. So this isn't a supervisor screen. This is just some information that we make available to the agent to allow them to decide things like, is now a good time for me to take my break? So here I can either see all of the agents in the whole group, or I can restrict it to just show the agents in my team only. So what I can see for each agent is their status. So I can see that at the moment Lloyd Bowden is logged out, for instance. Simon, so these icons here match the icon on the top of the Ignite toolbar. So I can see Alex and Lloyd are logged out. I can see Don Smith's in Make Busy state, and Lee Thomas and Simon are available. I can actually turn these into graphs just by clicking on them. And as well as the agent stats, I've also got queue stats here. So when I click on queue stats, this will bring across details of the queues that I can be part of. So I can now see how many calls are waiting, how long the longest call's been waiting, how many agents are logged in. Of those agents, how many are idle? I can see how many calls are offered and how many calls have been abandoned. And again, I can turn these into graphs by clicking on them. It's a little bit slow, and that's just because this client PC that I'm using is got a load of different demo applications running on it. I can also delve into more details. So if I click on grid here, I can then scroll across here and actually see lots more detailed information, things like average time to abandon. I can see the handled percentage, how many calls have been interflowed off to voicemail or to that back office hunt group. I can see last 15 minute stats, and I can see stats for the last rolling hour. So good information. Again, if there was a big influx of calls, for instance, on the support queue, then this would enable the agent to say, okay, I'm going to quickly add myself in to that support queue and help deal with that high volume of calls that they've got going on there. When I finish with the dashboard, I can simply slide it away and it disappears. The last button to show you is this switch down at the bottom here. When I flick this switch, this turns this from an agent control bar to an agent stats bar. So I can now see information relating to my shift. So how long in this shift have I spent in Make Busy? How long have I spent in Do Not Disturb? How long have I spent on outbound calls? How many non-ACD calls I've taken? So that would be calls that haven't come via the queues. How many ACD calls I've taken, calls that have come via the queues, and how long I've been in the idle state. So just a nice little bit of wallboard information there for the agent that they can choose to show. And then when I finish my shift, I simply click on the star, click on log out, and that takes me straight out of the queue. So as you can see, it's a very, very simple application to use, and this is really the major benefit of this compared to some of the other products. As long as the person knows how to handle calls in a Lync Enterprise Voice environment, you can give them that 5 or 10 minute overview as to what each of these buttons do, and they can be working actively on the contact center within 5 or 10 minutes. So very, very good for covering people if they go off sick, or if you did have a short period of time, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, where it gets very, very busy. You can train some agents very, very quickly to come on and provide some additional resource for you. So I'll come back to the demo in a little bit. I'm just going to flick back to my PowerPoint file a second. So just to recap, longest idle agent routing, we've got business hour capabilities. So that means that we can set each queue to automatically open and close based on certain business hours. We've got overflow and interflow timers that can route calls to other queues, agent groups, or answer points. We've got auto attendance, so thank you for calling. Please press 1 for sales, 2 for support. And we've got intelligent in-queue messaging, giving things like wait times, announcements, and music. We use Lync to give enterprise presence, so we can see for subject matter experts and whether they're available, and use instant messaging for contacting those people. And we've got full reporting on all the contact center resources. As well as that, we've got real-time monitoring, which I'm going to show you in a second, and control of agents and ACD queues. And we've got a single point of administration and screen popping. So I'm just going to flick back to the demo. So what I'm showing you here is a sample real-time display that you could potentially use. So every supervisor can have as many profiles as they want to, and those profiles can be either shared profiles that everybody can access or their own personal profiles. Each profile is built up from scratch, so you decide exactly what monitors you want to choose by selecting them from the toolbar at the top here. So I've just chosen a sample of a few different types of monitors and charts and marquees. So at the top we've got a scrolling marquee, and this is showing sales. So for the sales queue, calls offered; for the support queue, calls offered; for the sales queue, calls handled; for the support queue, calls handled, etc. So you can see those scrolling across, just to give an example of the sort of things we can do. These marquees can also be used to set up a whole screen worth of tiles. So for wallboards, if you wanted to put this up on an LCD display in the contact center, a large screen TV, you could create a number of tiles based on these marquees showing all the information you want. So that's a typical marquee that you'd see in most contact center applications. These are all variables inserted in here. So if I was to get a call waiting, obviously these numbers would change. If we look down at the bottom here, agent state by column, what you'll see here is each column represents agents in a different state. So any agents in the left-hand column are agents that are logged in and waiting to take a call. Any agents in the next column over are unavailable, either because they're in a do not disturb, make busy, or wrap up time state. Any agents here are on an ACD call, and any agents here are in a logged off state. So say for instance it was 9:10 in the morning, you could see that Lee was sat at his desk. He should be logged in and taking calls. I'm going to right click on Lee, I'm going to go to agent control, and I'm going to log Lee on. And what this will do is it will bring up a dialog box showing me the queues that Lee can be part of and asking me which queues I want to put Lee into. So I'm going to log Lee into the sales queue and I'm going to say OK. And what you see happens is Lee moves immediately from this logged off column over into the bottom of the idle column here. So we can see that Simon would be the longest idle agent because he's at the top of the column. Lee would be the next longest idle agent. Other things I can do. So I can do silent monitor, and under the silent monitor options I can either tag an agent for silent monitoring. So what that means is if I had a new starter and I wanted to listen to their calls throughout the day, if I tag them, it's like tagging somebody for status changes within Lync. So every time that that agent gets a call, I'll get a little toaster pop up in the bottom right hand corner of my screen asking me if I want to silent monitor that call. So it saves me having to manually watch for that agent to get a call and dive in to monitor their active call at the time. This will prompt me every time they get a call. So I can tag an agent, untag an agent, or I can monitor an active call. So if this agent was on an active call, I could select monitor active call and go straight in and silent monitor them. I can log an agent on, as I showed you. I can log an agent off. I can join leave agent group. So for instance, if there was a big influx of calls in the support queue and Simon was only logged into the sales queue, I can go join leave agent group. I can add Simon into the support queue and say OK. And now Simon, you'll see, is actually logged into both of those queues. And I can use Lync to send them an instant message to tell them that I've done that. So they would see each call that comes in when the Lync toast pop-up comes up, it says the name of the path that the calls come in on. But if the agent was in, it's probably best just to send them an instant message to say I've just logged you into the support queue, so be ready to take support calls. So I can set make busy and I can choose any of those make busy reason states. I can remove make busy. I can set do not disturb. Any of the do not disturb reasons, remove. I can cancel the work timer. So as well as doing that for individual agents, I've also got similar options for the entire monitor. So I could say log all the agents off, for instance, or I set all the agents into make busy. So you might want to do this, for instance, if there was a team meeting. So you could very easily put everybody into team meeting status just by coming in here, set do not disturb meeting. The good thing is with this is if I went to do that, it warns me and says you're attempting to change the real-time state of every agent in this monitor. Do you want to continue? So it's not just going to log everybody off or put everybody into a do not disturb state without telling me I'm about to do it. Another useful time when you might want to do that is for things like evacuation. So if you had a fire alarm, you can very, very quickly just log everybody out so that the out of hours message plays or the emergency evacuation message plays. I can also set alarms. So when I click on this, this brings up a whole host of alarms or variables specific to this particular monitor that I've right-clicked on. So I can set things like outbound. So if somebody is on an outbound call for longer than, say, 5 minutes, I might want the background color to change to red, for instance, to indicate that I perhaps want to silently monitor them. Or I might want to choose one of the make busy reasons. So if I chose make busy lunch and I add a threshold, I'm just going to say 1 minute, but imagine I'm setting this for 1 hour. If anybody's in make busy lunch for 1 hour or greater, then I want to change the background color to amber. I want to display a pop-up message, and I want that pop-up message to display for 20 seconds, and I want it to say agent on long lunch break. And I'm going to save that. I can get the application to come to the front of the screen. So if I was working in Excel or Outlook and one of these thresholds was broken, I can actually get this to actually pop to the front of the screen. So as soon as one of these variables is broken, one of these thresholds is broken, it's going to pop the application to the front of the screen, and then it's going to show me the pop-up message, so I'm not having to scan the screen trying to find out which one of the thresholds is broken. It's going to give me a pop-up message to indicate exactly why. And the other thing that I can do is I can send an email. So this could be, for instance, number of calls waiting or agents available in the queue. If the agents available drop below a certain amount, we can get this to send an email to a group distribution list telling more agents to log in, or that there's more than 5 calls waiting. Or I could get it to send me an email as a supervisor. So if I was off in an internal meeting, I can take my BlackBerry with me. If any of these thresholds are broken, it's sending me an email to tell me. So when I say OK, what you'll notice is because Don Smith's been on lunch for 36 minutes, then it's gone straight away into a background color of amber, and we've got agent on long lunch break pops up in the bottom right hand corner. I can also add additional thresholds, so I can go to set alarms. I'm going to choose the same reason again, so I'm going to choose make busy lunch. I'm going to add an additional threshold, so this time I'm going to say, so I'll say 30 minutes for instance. So the first one was a minute, this one's 30 minutes. This time I want the background color to change to red, and I want the pop-up message to say excessively long lunch break. Now I'm going to say OK, and you'll see straight away that background changes to red because Don's been in there for 37 minutes, and we can see agent on excessively long lunch break. So as well as this, we've also got the capability of setting all those same sort of alarms on these other monitors. So if we look at this agent shift monitor, for instance, this lists all of the agents, and it gives us information such as the time that they logged on, when they last did anything, how long they've been on their shift, of that time, how long have they spent actually on ACD calls, how many ACD calls have they taken, how long have they spent on non-ACD, how many non-ACD calls have they taken, how long have they spent on outbound, how many outbound calls have they made, how long have they been in do not disturb, how many times, all of this typical information that you can see. We've got this one here, short ACD count. So there's a way of us putting a timer into the system to say, if a call lasts less than 20 seconds, I'm going to count that, for instance, as a short ACD count call. That way, if I see one agent that's got a high number of short ACD calls, then it might be that they're slamming the phone down on the customer rather than actually dealing with the call to make themselves longest idle again. So lots and lots of information I can put in here, but obviously every organization is different, and you might want to customize these monitors. So if we look at the monitor at the top here, the queue monitor, this is saying we've got Lync sales queue. It's showing us how many calls are waiting, how long the longest call's been waiting, how many agents available. Of those agents, how many are on ACD calls, how many are idle, how many are on non-ACD calls, all this information. But I can right click on here, and I can go to properties, and I can go to layout, and you can see that there's lots and lots of information, some of which is ticked and some is unticked. So I can decide exactly what I want to see in these monitors by ticking and unticking and selecting the bits of information I want. So for instance, if I had an overflow group and I wanted to see the percentage of calls handled by group 1 and by my overflow group, I can simply select those two, and it will actually add these into the monitor here. So percentage handled by 1, percentage handled by 2. But I might not want it right over here on the right hand side. So I can just grab hold of that, and I can actually drag that and drop it wherever I want it in this monitor. Service level may be my most important stat, for instance. So rather than having it right over here on the left, I could grab service level and I could drop it right down at the front here. And again, I can set up alarms. So I can say, if I add a threshold, say for instance my service level was to answer 90% of calls within 20 seconds, then I can say, okay, I want this to show that anything less than that threshold I want to be red, and anything more than that threshold I want to be green. So straight away you can see that because the service level is 0, because we haven't handled any calls on the demo system today, those background colors have gone red. And again, I can have pop-up messages, emails, pop the application to the front of the screen, lots of information. And the same with the ACD shift monitor here, so I can set up all the same sort of thresholds. Over on the right here, I've just added a few graphs in to show you some of the graphs that are available. So I've got the Lync sales chart, so this is showing me my sales queue. This is my legend, so we can see that I've got 2 agents logged in and available. I can show that it would show calls waiting, it will show a number of outbound calls, handled, abandoned. But again, each call center is different, and you may want to customize this. So just by clicking on chart properties, by clicking on properties and chart properties, I can choose series data, and then I can choose from any of these stats that I want to show on the actual graph. So if I was interested in how many calls were interflowing to my back office hunt group, then I can add that there. And if I wanted to see how many calls were being requeued, a requeued call is where it gets delivered to an agent. The agent's forgotten to go in to make busy, so it rings for the requeue timer, which may be 15 seconds. If the agent hasn't answered the call within 15 seconds, it puts them into system make busy, and it requeues the call to the next available agent. So if I select that, you can see it very, very quickly modifies my graph and my legend for me. So very, very customizable. I know some people have said that this looks a little bit Commodore 64-ish in terms of graphics, but this does get a makeover, and I'll show you a screenshot of how it's going to look when we get to the next release. So two more things to tell you about real time. The first thing is we've got the capability of an auditor tool here. So I can turn on auditor controls. What this does is this allows me to rewind this real-time monitor to a specific date and time. So for instance, if somebody said, I rang in on Monday between 12 and 12:15, I waited for 15 minutes and I eventually gave up because nobody answered my call. I can rewind this monitor to a certain date and time. I'm going to rewind it to 10 o'clock today, just to give you an example, because that's when we started doing some activity on the contact center. So I rewind it to 10 past 10. I'm going to select play. Oh, actually, I'm going to choose my speed over here. So I can choose 1 to 1, or for every 1 second, it jumps forward 2 seconds. 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 30. I'll choose 1 to 120, just to make sure that we see some activity on here. And I press play, and you'll see it builds up my contact center monitor, and you can see this jumping forward in 2 minutes. So 10:22, 10:24, and you can see now some activity going on here. I can pause it, and I can slow it down. So I'm going to pause. I'm now going to slow this down to maybe 1 to 30, for instance, and play. And now you'll see this jump forward in 30-second increments. So full tool for investigating complaints or investigating areas of poor performance. So if you had maybe an hour's period where you had 8 abandoned calls, you can actually go to that period here using the auditor tool and find out exactly what happened during that period as to why you had 8 calls abandoned. It's like Sky Plus for the contact center. I'm now going to go. I'm going to turn off my auditor controls here, and then it just goes back into real-time mode. And the other thing to tell you about this is we've got forecasting capabilities. So not workforce optimization, but it's forecasting. So because the system is continually gathering historical information, it allows me to predict by 15-minute period how many agents I'm likely to need. So to hit my service level. So if my service level was answering 90% of calls within 20 seconds, I can say on a Tuesday morning between 9 and 9:15 I need 10 agents. Between 9:15 and 9:30 I'm going to need 12 agents. And also it allows us to perform what-if scenarios. So if the chief exec said, actually I want to increase that from 90% within 20 seconds to 90% within 10 seconds, you can put that information in here and then say to the chief exec, well, that's fine, but we're going to need to hire 10 more agents, and here's my backup to prove that. Or if you know that April is a particularly busy period, and you know that maybe last year you failed to hit your target, you can take last April's data, to perform a forecast on it and say, if I was to hit my target, how many agents would I need? And that will allow you to actually staff up with the right number of agents for this April coming. Other things it allows you to indicate, maybe you send somebody off to do the post at 10 o'clock every morning, but this might indicate to you that's actually when that half an hour period is when you actually need your most agents available. So you could delay the post until 11 o'clock and that would help you cover your busy period. So I'm going to move off real time and show you reporting next. So reporting's web-based, so you can open this through a browser. There's around 115 reports in the system, and they're categorized into a couple of different categories. So the first thing you do is you select the category of report that you want to run. So I'm going to choose one of the agent reports. So I click on agent report. The system will now bring up my list of agent reports available. You can see it working away up here. I can now choose the particular agent report that I want. So I'm going to choose agent performance by period. I then choose the agent that I want to run the report for, or I could select all. So I'm going to choose Lee. I then tick the days of the week that I want to run the report for. I can then select my start and end date. So because there's very little traffic goes on in the demo system, I'm going to go back a couple of months just to try and get us some activity. So I'm going to choose 1st of August through to today's date. I'm going to choose a 9 o'clock start time, but actually we only work until 5. And I'm going to choose whether I want 15, 30 or 60-minute intervals. So I'm going to choose 60 minutes. I now submit that request. So the system now goes off to pull all of this information from the SQL database and form it into an Excel template. So we can see here that the report is pending. This is a browser window, so it will automatically refresh every 10 seconds. Just to speed things up, I'm going to refresh the browser window up here. We can now see that's complete. So if I click on View here, what this does is this tries to open this in Excel. So it's checking on it's running a security scan, and then you'll see that the report will open up straight into Excel. There's no crystal reporting or any complicated process. All the way through, you can see it's very, very straightforward, very simple to use. So the report comes straight out in Excel. Typical call center report. This is just one that I've picked on. So we can see ACD calls handled, non-ACD calls handled, how many calls were abandoned, how many outbound calls were made, how many calls were requeued. So the typical stuff that you may see. A bit more activity in here because as well as the data sheet within Excel, it creates a chart sheet as well. I don't think this is going to have much information in it. There's a couple of little bits of looks like Madonna's bra in there. So that gives us a graphical output as well straight away. And we can right click on this because it's Excel, and we can change this chart type to we can change the chart to any typical Excel chart that you might want to see. So if you prefer to see it as a pie chart, you can do that, or if you wanted to see it as a area chart, you just basically choose column chart, whatever you want from Excel, and it just changes that for you. So I'm going to switch back and just run through a couple more of the slides a second. So I haven't mentioned, but we can screen pop as well. So we can screen pop into any application that can be called via an executable file or a URL. So for instance, we could take the URL of salesforce.com, or in this case, this is Microsoft Dynamics. So we take the URL and we say every time that we get a call, we're going to launch this URL, and we're going to append to it this variable. And the variable is 9 times out of 10 going to be the call in line ID, or you may choose that it's the path name. So depending on how you want it to screen pop. But what that does then is signal to the CRM system that you want to launch the record for the particular variable that you're sending to it. So CLI, typically the call in line ID, telephone number of the caller. This shows you typically what an agent might see when they get a call. So you can see the name of the queue, sales, and then you would get the call in line ID in here as well, the caller's telephone number here. And then that's triggering a screen pop into Microsoft Dynamics. This is the programming interface. So a very, very straightforward interface that allows you to do everything, all of your programming, your setting up of your queues, your agents, all through this single database. We've got synchronization with Active Directory in here. With the reporting, one thing I forgot to mention is I showed you how to run an ad hoc report, but as well as running them on an ad hoc, you can also schedule them to automatically generate, email out, and print as well if you want to. So it might be that the contact center manager wants to see reports on a daily basis, the office manager may want to see them on a weekly basis, and the chief exec might want to see a different set of reports on a monthly basis. You can schedule all of those reports once, and they will automatically generate, run, and email out to those people on an hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly basis. So in the latest release, which was launched last month, we've taken a product that we had on the main Mitel, the Mitel Contact Center, called our Visual Workflow Manager. So the biggest complaint that we were finding, and I think every manufacturer does find this, is most organizations find it frustrating that they can't do their own call scripting, or if they do, it's very, very complicated. So Mitel has overcome this by creating a Visio type interface that allows you as the call center supervisor or the IT team to actually draw out, using this Visio type interface, the call flow that you want to create. So each one of these are just icon templates that sit off on a legend on the right hand side. So the first thing you do is you drag your answer onto the diagram. Then you might want to play a greeting. So you're going to grab your greetings icon from the legend and drop it onto the diagram here. Then you want to browse for this icon. You right click on here and you would browse to the actual WAV file that you wanted this greeting to play. Then you would type in a label. So in this case, our label is please enter the extension. So that's what the greeting is going to ask the customer to do. Then we want to collect the extension, and we're then going to do one of these couple of different things. So you can see that it's very simple for a call center supervisor to create their own workflows, their own call flows here. You can test all of this before you actually make it go live. Once you've tested it and you're happy with it, you push the button and it actually programs the system up with this information. So as standard within the product, without the bolt-on IVR that I just showed you, we've got comfort messaging, we've got upfront messaging, thank you for calling, please press 1 for sales, 2 for service, so auto attendant type messaging, and accept user input where the customer can select which queue they go into. We can also route based on the call in line ID. So we can, if we've got high priority customers that we want to route off to a certain team or a certain queue that gets answered more quickly, we just can do that based on their CLI. I mentioned Professional Association of Diving Instructors. They use this actually to recognize which country the caller is calling from, and then it routes it to the correct language speaking. Switzerland would route to the German queue, for instance, France to the French queue, England to the or UK to the British queue. So we use that call in line ID based on the +41, +44, depending what the lead-in digits are. Additional functionality that the bolt-on IVR would give you would be that whole Visio type interface, but it also gives you things like time of day, day of week, day of year specific messaging. So that means that you can actually play good morning, thank you for calling Mitel, or good afternoon, thank you for calling Mitel. Things like that, you can do it based on actual greetings, based on different days of the week and times a day. Queue conditional messaging, so we can play different messages depending on how busy the queue is. We can, in the initial release, which is out now, we can have callbacks. So customer, in the current product, so without the bolt-on IVR, we can do dial out of queue. So thank you for calling. Your call's important to us. Please press 1 now to leave a message, and that will take them to voicemail. But with the IVR, we could actually say, please press 1 now to request a callback. And what the system does is it takes the caller's number and it delivers that to a web page interface, so that you'd have an agent manually watching, and as people requested callbacks, they would click to dial on that to call the customer back. When we get to the next release, which is version 8, which is Q3 next year, it will be fully automated callbacks, where once the customer's requested it, the system takes their place in the queue. When they get to the front of the queue, it calls the agent. When the agent answers the call, it then rings the customer back. So at the moment, it's a web interface for this version. We can also do things like outbound workflows. So this is where you would put in maybe an Excel sheet of if you took like an optician's as an example, you could take an Excel sheet, upload that into the IVR. The IVR would call each one of those numbers and say, please be reminded you have an optician's appointment tomorrow. If this is not convenient and you wish to cancel, please press 1 now to speak to an agent. We've also got multimedia type capabilities. So in the latest release, we've taken this is an application that's actually running in from our Mitel Contact Center application. So the Contact Center application that works with our Mitel PBX. So I've actually got this loaded onto the Lync demo system now. We've Lync enabled this and made this work alongside the Lync client. So just bear with me a second while I switch back and show you this for real. So this is the toolbar that I told you to ignore for a second over here. So this would run alongside our Lync client. So you've seen that we've got Lync, this running as our voice application. But if the agent wanted to handle multimedia interactions as well, like emails and web chats, then they have this toolbar over here. When I click on this arrow down at the bottom right of the screen, you'll notice that it pops out this interface. Now this is very similar to Outlook. If you picture this as being a little bit like Outlook, where you've got your inbox and your drafts, and then here you've got the different queues. This toolbar is a bit like that toolbar that I showed you on Lync. So on here I can choose my group presence, so I can decide whether I'm in the sales web chat queue or whether I'm in the sales email queue, for instance. So you can see these icons reflect differently. And we can also do things like set my busy status. So if I click on this, we can actually see that I'm currently in system make busy. So I'm going to take myself out of that make busy state. You see the icon up here changes, and you can see that I've now got an incoming transaction. So I've got an email. So this icon here tells me it's an email, and it's from Lloyd Bowden. And you can see that I've got a toast pop up in the top of the screen. It's partly covered by this toolbar. So that's come into my inbox, and this is an IMAP based interface, by the way, so this will work with any type of email system, typically Exchange 2010, 2013, Office 365, Gmail, Lotus Notes I think as well is supported on it. So it's delivered that email into my particular inbox, and you can see that it's red, indicating that it's in like a ringing state. So if you were to compare this with a call, it's now in a ringing state. So if I did not answer this, and when I say answer it, I mean accept it, like answering, like lifting the receiver on a phone call. If I didn't answer this before the requeue timer expired of maybe say 15 minutes, because an email is not as critical as a phone call, obviously, then this is going to put me into system make busy, and it's going to requeue this email to the next available agent. I'm going to maximize this window a second. So I'm going to double click it. So in effect, I'm answering it, like lifting the handset on a phone call. So I'm not responding, I'm just accepting it. I'm answering it like answering a phone call. This machine is a little bit sluggish because it's got all those other demo applications running on it. Okay, so now what you can see has happened is this, I've answered it, so it's stopped, it's not in a ringing state any longer, it's gone grey. And you can see the right hand pane has now changed into an email response pane. So I can now see exactly what the customer is asking for. I can insert templates in here. So rather than me having to type the same email 10 times a day when each of my customers is asking different bits of information, I can just simply insert any one of a number of templates in here, which I can select. I can send that back. I can do things like maybe I need to make an inquiry about this email. So before I can actually respond to it, I need to send an email off to find out some more information from somebody internally. So I'm going to put this email on hold. And then what that would allow me to do is if there was another email in the queue, I could then get on and start dealing with that email here. Well, I don't know whether you can see that, but there's a hold icon on there, like a pause icon. When I come back to that email, I've got the answer I want. I'm going to remove hold down in the bottom right here. I can now, maybe I want to transfer that email. So I can transfer that to an external destination. So that might be a third-party contractor. So housing associations, for instance, they might transfer this repair request off to a third-party contractor. I can transfer it to another queue. I can transfer it to an agent, or I can transfer it to somebody else, any other email address really. So internal transfer, my agents, or I can transfer it to a queue. So I'm going to transfer it back into the demo email queue. What you see down at the bottom right is you can see my workload descriptor. So each agent is different. Every agent has got different capabilities. So when you get a new starter, for instance, they might be capable of only handling one web chat, but as they get better, then their web chat capability is going to increase. So you could increase that. Then you could say, actually, now that they're familiar, I'm gonna add it so they can actually deal with 2 web chats at a time, and they can deal with 10 emails, because emails are not real time, so they can have up to 10 emails in here. When a web chat's longest idle, it will deliver to the top of the queue, because obviously that web chat is more important than an email. So when I'm the longest idle agent in the web chat queue, I will get that web chat here, and this right-hand pane will change to a web chat type pane. So it will then allow me to interface with the customer and type back to them using that web chat type interface. There's a full repository held within here. So if the web chat said, I sent an email in last week, and can you have a quick look at it and tell me what the answers are, because I haven't had a response yet, I can very quickly find through the customer repository here exactly what that web chat, what that email said, what the customer was asking. I can see if my agents have responded, what they've said, what all the previous dialogue that's gone on between me and the customer. So we've also got, if you look at the top here, I've got the My Folders tab, which is this view. I've also got the Real-Time Monitor tab. So if I click on that, that brings up the equivalent of the agent dashboard for multimedia. So in here, we've got, we can see details for the email queue, for the web chat queue. We can see the telephone, my voice call details here as well. So currently, we're going to have 2 separate applications on the desktop, like I showed you, one for voice and one for multimedia. But when we get to version 8, it will be this single interface for handling all media types. So even voice calls will deliver into this IMAP-based interface. So at the top here, if we had a voice call, obviously that's highest priority. So that's going to come in and it's going to deliver straight to the top of my inbox in a ringing state. When I click on it, the right-hand pane is going to give me a preview of the call-in line ID, which queue they've come in on, how long they've been waiting. When I double-click it, it's going to connect that through to my Lync phone, and I'm going to actually answer it. So it's this will become a single agent interface when we get to the next release. So at that time, you'll have a fully customizable dashboard here. So this is the equivalent of the agent dashboard at the moment, which we couldn't do a lot to customize. Here we can set up exactly what we want to see using these push pins in the top here to pin those queues that we actually want to see on our dashboard all the time. And as I mentioned, the visual workflow manager on the voice queue, so that Visio type interface, we've taken that same interface and we've applied it to the multimedia type interactions. So for instance, you could create a new inbound email workflow that says I'm going to search the body text and the subject title for brochure, and if it says brochure, if there's brochure mentioned, I'm going to route that straight to our sales team. Or if there says fault or repair, I'm going to route that straight to our repairs team. And similarly for web chat, so if the customer puts in their topic web chat, for instance, I don't know, brochure request, then I could go off to and take actually a list of information and say, please select which brochure you request from the following list. Please enter your address. Do you require anything else today? If they say yes, puts it through to an agent. If it says no, thank you very much. Your brochure will be in the post, and it will actually email that straight off to the warehouse, who will pick the brochure packet and send it to the customer. So it's just a way of automating this, making it very easy for you as a supervisor to actually automate this, or the IT team in your organization to automate it. So we've also got skills-based routing in the non-media stuff, so you can assign any one of 1 to 256 skill sets, and it will route interactions based on the highest queue priority, highest skill priority, and then to the longest idle agent. We've also got this Contact Us tab capability. So this can be installed on any web page, doesn't have to be on your Contact Us page, and we can set it so that it will automatically expand if a customer hovers on the page for a certain amount of time, or the customer could click on it to expand it. And when they do, it gives them details of how they can contact the business, so all the different methods, and it tells them the expected wait time. So for instance, if I was to make a phone call into this particular contact center, it's going to take me 2 minutes 35 to get a response. Whereas if I initiate a web chat, I'm going to get a response within 1 minute 32 seconds. So it gives the customer the choice of how they contact you and what those anticipated wait times are. And then this next screenshot shows you how you would do it if this was a much larger organization with multiple departments. So you could see that there's multiple departments, and these are all the different methods and the anticipated wait times, which is actually disabled. So you don't have to have it turned on if you don't want the wait times on there. And if I was to click on that web chat, for instance, that's going to bring up a box similar to this. So they would type in their name, they'd type in their email address, they'd type in there the topic, and that topic can either be free text or a drop down, for instance. When they submit that, they will get an automatic response back saying, please wait while your call gets transferred to an agent, for instance, or it would take them through whatever automated workflow you set up. So for instance, if you have to take a customer through security questions, maybe 3 or 4 security questions before you can help them, then why not automate that? So get the system to ask them those 5 questions, and then when it delivers that through to the agent can just check those answers straight away on the system, and then go ahead and go straight into the helping the customer out. So it just saves time for the agent, rather than them having to ask those 5 questions and have the customer running around trying to find their contact number, for instance, sorry, their contract number, or their whatever it is that they need to clear security. And this shows you an example. So you can see from the top icon here, instead of it being an email this time, this is a web chat. And you can see how that right-hand pane has changed now to be dealing with web chat rather than that email interface that was in there before. I mentioned that the Commodore 64 graphics were going, and we were getting a bit of a makeover. So this is showing you what the new dashboard looks like. So in version 8, this is already the dashboard for the multimedia client. But for the voice client, this will become the voice client dashboard as well when we move to version 8, Q3 next year. And then this is an example of some of the supervisor reports available. So this shows us for things like we can see on a per queue basis how many emails were handled, how many were delivered, how many were completed. We can see the service level, and then we can see on an agent by agent basis which of those agents opened the email, completed it, replied to it, marked it as no reply needed, or marked it as junk, or it got requeued. So down here we can see some emails were requeued to other agents because these agents hadn't dealt with them within the detailed time. And then this is showing us some of the other queue performance by agent reports. We've also got the capability of handling social media. So we would create a separate email queue into our client or into our contact center, and you would take a third-party service, something similar to what BizView offer. So BizView is the company that Mitel have partnered with because they offer excellent value for money compared to some of the others out there, and also because it enables us to have a Mitel branded integrated solution. So you would basically choose maybe 5 search terms that BizView would hold for you, and they would search the whole of Twitter for those search terms. So it might be, for instance, for us, it might be Mitel complaint. So if anybody tweets about Mitel complaint, that's going to send that straight into our contact center to the longest idle agent, and the agent's going to say, sorry that you've been having problems, how can we help you, what can we do to resolve it for you? So it turns what can be quite a negative publicity for your organization into quite positive when other people see that we jump and reply straight away to anybody that's got an issue. And another third-party application, a partnership that we've got, is with an organization called LiveLook, and that would be if you were a heavy internet based organization and your customers often needed assistance to navigate your website, then if they ring you up and say, I can't find this on your website, say, oh, just click on the help button and give me the 6-digit code. And then you as the agent type in the 6-digit code, and that you then basically join their desktop and co-browse the website with them and say, okay, that product is actually situated in this section under this title and in this area here. So it just allows you to co-browse using their desktop machine. So when we get to version 8, I mentioned that this client's going to do everything. So it's going to do voice, email, web chat, fax, social media, and SMS. So it will look very, very similar. So the toolbar will dock to the Lync client, but when we click on this arrow down at the bottom, on the bottom of the toolbar here, it's going to slide out that rest of that multimedia client. So that will slide out from the side of this toolbar here. And that's it. Any questions, please?
At this point, I'll unmute the audience so they can ask questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, the audience is now unmuted, so please feel free to ask any questions.
Good morning, it's Paul Mortimer from Exeter City Council.
Hi, Paul.
Hi. I don't know. I'm not sure if I had a problem with the sound, whether it's my end, but not sure if I've missed this. Is there a auto switchboard voice facility, i.e., say the name of the department or caller you require?
Not as standard within the contact center. I don't know if that's something that you can do in Lync, though. Maybe Chris.
I believe so. It's something I'd need to confirm with the more technical types, but I believe that's something you could do within Lync. So I can confirm that for you. That's not a problem.
Okay.
So that would be a third-party application. You would actually speak. You'd actually speak the name of the caller, and that would just route it through. Then, so you speak the name of the department, for instance, and that would then route it through to the particular queue.
Well, or to an extension or direct person. So.
In actual fact, that is available Lync functionality. Thinking about it, because Nexus ourselves actually have that on our call-in. So when you dial in Nexus, you can ask to speak to an individual, and you'll get routed directly to them. You can indeed set that up for groups of people as well, should you wish.
Right.
So sales or technical teams or what have you.
Okay. So in essence, then, if somebody said, for example, council tax, then it will be routed through to the council tax queue if that's what the instruction.
Yeah,
was.
should you wish to do so, yeah, you can set up multiple groups or directly to individuals.
I noticed Martin has asked about the slides. Will the slides be available? Yes, I'm sure we can do that. Chris, have you got everybody's email address to be able to distribute the slides out?
Yes, we do. But what we're also doing is recording the session, so we will we'll send an email out following with a link to the recording, as well as the PowerPoint being on there.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Is this compatible with any existing legacy telephone systems?
So what I've shown you today is Contact Center for Lync. So it works with Lync 2010 and Lync 2013 and is certified for both. The multimedia client that you've seen, that contact center is the equivalent of that contact center, works on a traditional Mitel PBX as well.
Right. Would anything work on a Siemens PBX?
No, I'm afraid not.
No. Okay.
Does anybody have any further questions at this point? Okay, assuming not, if we end it there, then as I said before, everybody attending will be followed up via email, so you'll have our contact details within there. Should you think following you have any further questions, Nexus run a quarterly schedule of events which you should be on the mailing list for. If there are any others that do take your fancy, please feel free to join. This is also available on our website should you wish to take a look. At this point, thank you very much for attending this morning, and as I said, we will be in contact.
Thanks very much for taking the time to watch the presentation.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.